Hi there, everybody. And today we have Thomas Swick. I'm pronouncing that correctly, right?
You are.
And we both probably have a wonderful case of wanderlust. I know I have since I was a little kid. And here at Global Radio TV, you're probably the embodiment of all that's interesting from around the world, since you had been a travel editor for the Sun Sentinel for more than 20 years, and now you're just coming out with your own book, and you've been writing forever about travel, right?
I've been writing about travel really, since the 70s when I went to France for a year because I thought I wanted to be a travel writer, and I thought I should learn another language and not
You speak French as well.
just English. So I went to France and enrolled in a school to learn French for 7 months. And when school ended in June, I was just getting kind of comfortable. I didn't want to come home. So I went to the northeast of France in Alsace, and I got a job on a farm for the summer.
That's fascinating.
And that was perfect because the family, I lived with the family, they had a son my age.
Oh, that's wonderful.
I spoke French day and night.
Oh, that's beautiful. And how many months were you working on the farm? Or were you
Just 2 months.
2 months, yeah.
2 months. Once they started picking tobacco, I left. It was the worst job I've ever had.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
What's that like? I don't even know
Well,
what
you
tobacco
bend
looks
and you
like.
pick the bottommost leaves first because they're the ones that mature. So you're bent all day long.
Wow.
Your fingers get stained from the tobacco leaf.
Fascinating.
And then at night, when it gets too dark to work in the fields, you have to go to the shed and hang the leaves. So it's like constant labor, morning, noon, and night.
And is it done by machines these days?
No,
now,
well, I don't know. This farm no longer has tobacco. It was one of the Danny's follies.
Very interesting. I didn't realize France was producing that or well known for that. And
Well, they have the Gitane and the Gaulois. They have their cigarettes. So they need tobacco for them.
so many people smoke in Europe, or at least did in the past. So, wow. And so you came back to the States and you immediately started writing, or you?
Yeah, but not as a travel writer. I got my first newspaper job in New Jersey, which is where I'm from, at the Trenton Times, and I was a feature writer.
Ah, nice.
And it really was, because it was kind of like travel writing, but within a day's drive of home. I would go out and spend a day or two with some really interesting person who did something I knew nothing about.
Yeah.
A woodcutter or a tobacconist or
I love it. I love those.
a harness racing driver. And I learned about these different lives, and write about them. And then, I left that job, though, after a year and a half to move to Poland.
Wow.
Because on my way back from France, I'd met this Polish girl.
Oh, there we go.
And I went to Poland and ended up living there for 2.5 years.
And you speak Polish now,
And I
too?
learned Polish,
That's beautiful. No, that's wonderful. And is your descendancy part Polish, or there's
No, the name sounds, some people are fooled and they think Swick might be Polish, but it's German. And then on the other side of the family, it's kind of German-Irish. So, and there's some Welsh in there, too.
And Welsh as well. Interesting. I have to say Ireland was one of those very unique places that I visited. One of my best friends from college moved to Sligo, had gotten married. I was a bridesmaid in her wedding, but...
William Butler Yeats' country, the great Irish poet, is from Sligo, I think.
I didn't know he was from Sligo,
Yeah,
but...
I think so. We're buried there. Yeah.
Wow. Well, which of your trips would you consider was, let's say, 3 of the most unique or interesting? How many countries have you been to?
I've been to over 60 countries, but I don't really talk about that much, because I think it's not so much the quantity as the quality of your trip.
Correct.
And one of the trips I write about in this book, that's coming out, The Joys of Travel, is a trip I took to
the beautiful cover here.
And
so nostalgic.
It's a trip I took to Sicily a few years ago.
I love Sicily, yeah.
To write about the anti-mafia organization there. They're a group of young people who are now kind of standing up to the mafia and getting businesses to say no when the mafia comes around asking for protection money.
So you believe it still obviously exists a little?
Oh, it does. It does.
Wow.
And you have these young people who've really made great strides. I mean, they've got a very large organization now.
How many members would they have?
They have over 1,000 businesses now in the Palermo area.
Fabulous.
That will refuse to pay the mafia.
I love that. That's great that they're...
And I spent a week with these people. people, and I met a restaurateur who not only refuses to pay the protection money, he went to court and identified his extortionist,
Wow,
and he's
my
got 4 bodyguards, 24 hours a day.
Oh my goodness, geez.
And we're eating outside his restaurant one day, having
my
lunch,
goodness,
and
yeah.
a mafioso walked by.
Oh my goodness. Could you tell, was he
And-
dressed like a mafioso? Or
No, well, this guy, the man, the restaurateur leaned toward me at one point and said, "This man is a killer."
Oh my gosh.
And all of a sudden, the tension just
Was-
mounted, and you could see men around the bodyguards around the square just kind
Wow.
of jumping into action, and it was
Like
a
in a
very tense
movie.
moment.
Wow.
Most of my travel stories aren't tense like that.
Sure.
And that one was. So that was a really interesting trip. And Vietnam, too, stands out. I went there many years ago in the early 90s when there weren't a lot of American tourists. And I wasn't sure what kind of reception I would get as an American in Vietnam.
Oh, they might have thought you were also French or European partially.
You know, I was hoping to use my French, and half the population back then and even today was under the age of 25.
Wow.
And all the young kids wanted to learn English. They didn't want to learn French.
The same
so
thing
I would
happened to
be
me.
sitting on a bench and kids would come up to me and say, "Are you American?"
Really?
And I'd say,
Oh.
"Yeah." And they say, "Could we practice our English?" And that's just what you want when you're a travel writer.
Yeah,
Because
you
we
wanna
just
interact.
talk for hours,
Definitely.
and it was
Oh,
fascinating.
that's very interesting. Yeah, no, when I had studied in Spain, I kept on thinking, okay, I look Asian. No one's going to practice English with me. This is perfect. Everybody wanted to practice English. I was like, But yeah, it was interesting because then you hear these amazing stories or just end up in places you wouldn't have ended up in with locals, like you were saying. So
That's the thing, and I talk about that in the book. That you know, as a travel writer, my job really, I think, is to have an experience that gets me kind of beneath the surface of the place and really find out what it's like to live there, what the people are like, how they think, how they live. And I think regular travelers can do this too, and many of them do. They tell me when I give talks, but you know, and there's certain tricks or certain strategies you can adopt to do that. And I think one is good preparation before you go. You know, the more you know about the place, the better you'll be able to talk to people once you get there.
Sure.
They'll appreciate that you know a little something. If you just go in as just completely ignorant, they're not
Right.
going to be that eager to
you're
talk
so
to you.
correct. Yeah.
But if you can show that you know the names of some of the good writers, some of their filmmakers, and talk to them intelligently about
Love it. No,
stuff,
it's a great tip. It's a fabulous tip.
people really warm to that. And then when you get there, just kind of getting off the tourist track and going, you know, to galleries, going to concerts,
Yeah.
sporting events.
That's a great local way to immerse yourself, and it's a safe way as well. Like you were mentioning, you don't want to necessarily go so off the beaten path sometimes
Right.
that you're in danger. But this is a great way to
Right.
integrate. Yeah.
And also, before you go, trying to get names of contacts. You know, people that you can email before you get there and say, you know, I'm coming, can we meet for coffee someday?
Yeah.
And that, you know, friends of friends, that sort of
always
thing.
loved doing
And now, you know, with the way travel
Internet.
is today with Airbnb,
Yeah.
you can stay in people's houses and meet people that
That's
way.
true.
Couch surfing and all that.
Yeah.
It's gotten easier, actually.
That's very interesting. I didn't think about that transition. That probably happened more because couch surfing was probably what, from 7 years ago or 5 years ago.
Even longer, because I
Before?
remember when I was at the paper and I left Sunset in 2008, there was a woman who did a story for me on couch surfing, and she
Fascinating.
was having great experiences with it.
No, I love the idea. I never used that, but a friend of mine who lives close to here, they had used it very frequently, and I know it's true that they do meet a lot of interesting people, or the people who have places that are Airbnb sort of owners or renters. They have met very interesting people, from what I understand too. So
I couch surfed in the late 90s before there was such a thing as couch surfing. It was a friend of a friend in Ankara, Turkey,
wow,
who invited me to stay with him and his girlfriend in the capital. And one night, I always remember, we just sat home and watched TV. But I could have done this in my hotel room,
Yeah.
but I had no idea what
Right,
was
what they were
happening.
saying, yeah.
But they explained all the news shows, the sitcoms. They told me everything that was happening. It was such an insight into
yeah.
Turkish culture that I wouldn't have gotten.
And they spoke
any
English,
other way. They
very
spoke
well?
quite good English.
That's
Yeah, he
fabulous.
was a journalist. He worked for TV in
Okay.
Ankara, and his girlfriend. she wasn't a journalist, but she was working too. She was interesting. She was half German, half Turkish.
Ah, nice.
So she had an interesting perspective.
Different insight. Yeah, that's another great tip. Meet journalists or those types of people, and they'll have amazing stories like Thomas. And
artists too.
Yeah.
I mean, people, creative people. You I tend to gravitate toward them, and they're really interesting because they kind of stand outside society themselves because of their
thoughts and
exactly their
risk-taking,
personalities. And they can have a really good insight into what the culture is like.
provides, and that's a very, I love that tip actually. That's a fabulous tip. And what was Ankara like? I missed it when I went to Turkey. I didn't get to see it.
Yeah, not a lot of tourists go there, and I think I only went there because this friend of a friend was living there, and I'm really glad I did because it was, it's the city that Ataturk declared, the founder of modern Turkey. Ataturk said that this is going to be the capital now after centuries of Istanbul.
Right.
And it grew up from nothing. But there's an amazing museum and memorial there to Ataturk, and in Turkey you see pictures of him everywhere. But in Ankara you really get kind of to understand the whole aura
persona
of him and what he means to the country.
I probably forgot. What would you say he symbolizes more? Is this more?
Well, I think he symbolizes the Turkey's move to become more Western, and become a modern country. And it's really interesting in Turkey now because there's this movement against that now.
That's what I've heard
to regress.
Yeah.
So
it's someone. A Jewish person who happens to be part Turkish. I think his mother was in the government.
There's a large Jewish community in Istanbul.
I didn't realize that. Yeah, but he was saying there's sort of that the movement in government now. A lot of it is becoming a little more conservative. And we were talking about Israel. You had been to Israel, and Claudio, the camera person here, is from there as well. So I didn't realize in such a small proximity there were so many cultures. Right? That's what you've observed about Israel, and I didn't know.
I mean, people from all over. It's kind of like a mini United States,
but in 4 miles. So
yeah.
Did you travel around when you were in Israel as well, or were you?
Not too much. Mainly Jerusalem and Tel Aviv. And again, Tel Aviv, I had it with the relatives of a friend of mine. And they invited me for dinner one night, and that's again exactly what I want. I want to get into a house. I want to see how people live. I want to eat with them, talk with them, and they told me, about life, what life was like.
Right.
In Tel Aviv. So those were great experiences.
Yeah, no, I have to say that's a wonderful tip. And thinking back, I think I've probably done that. If someone did refer someone to me, I would go, even if it's some no-name faraway city, because you have that very special, untouristic sort of viewpoint of different people.
And I say in the book, sometimes the less glamorous the place, the more gratifying the trip. Because if you go to touristy places, the people, the residents, are very used to tourists, and they're not that curious about in Paris. They know about Americans. They're not. But you go kind of the out-of-the-way place, some little town that no tourists go to, and you'll get that curiosity and sometimes that warmth that people kind of appreciate, that you're showing an interest
curiosity
in their town. I always feel that in Portugal, which I think kind of gets forgotten a little bit because it's next to Spain, and it's on the kind of far edge.
It's true.
And I've been to Portugal 3 times. It's one of my favorite countries.
Really? Okay.
Every time I go there, I feel like a guest.
They're probably, Brazilians are very hospitable.
I feel the same way in Brazil. I've been to Brazil twice. And Brazil's one of the few countries where I would call up a friend of a friend and say, hi, I'm so-and-so's friend, can we get together? I'm here for a few days. And they say, sure, how about tonight? They're just ready to drop everything and just go out.
I love it.
And it was a wonderful place for meeting people.
And in Portugal, did you have a similar experience with the people? They were also very inviting?
Not as outgoing as the Brazilians.
Right.
But the ones that I had contacts with, were very, very nice to me. And just everyday interactions, just going in the shops, there's this feeling that I don't know, I just always feel they make me feel
just
happy
delightful,
to
right?
be there. Yeah.
You know, I'm so sad. I went to Brazil this weekend, and those little egg tarts that I found in Portugal, I was only there for a day or two, they had it there in the airport in Brazil, and it didn't look the same. And I didn't even recognize it as such until you just said it now, but I should have eaten it because they were so good in Portugal that I brought some back on the plane. That's how good they were.
They do such good things with eggs and sugar.
Yeah.
And I went to the National Gastronomic Festival in Portugal one year.
Which city was that in?
In Santarém.
I'm not familiar with that. In the south?
North of Lisbon.
Okay.
And it's something that not many tourists know about. Nobody really talks about Portuguese food, and it was fantastic. You know, every province was represented, and then they always have a guest province from another country. And that year was Galicia, Spain. And the
Is it similar or very different, the Galicia food?
It's fairly similar to northern Portugal because it's, they share a border. But it was a great festival, and again, I was walking around with a Portuguese guide, and I didn't see any other foreigners.
Right? Or even foreigners, right? Wow.
Except for the Galicians, from Spain.
I'm a foodie. I love those types of festivals. I have to say, when is that particular festival?
That was in November.
It's every year.
So the weather's not that great.
It's a little cold.
Well, it's not cold. I mean, it's maybe a little cool and gray and maybe a little damp. It depends. But, it doesn't get that cold in Portugal. But it's a time when there are not a lot of tourists in the country.
Okay.
But keep that on your calendar.
How do you spell it? Santarém?
Santarem.
M as in Mary.
But they pronounce it A.
Okay.
It's Santarem, but pronounced Santarém.
Santarém, okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. I actually, the few times I've tried Portuguese food, it was amazing. I mean, it was very exceptional. It was very good, actually.
There are a few restaurants in Miami.
Those are the ones I've tried.
On Coral Way?
Yeah, that's what I've tried. Like the Little Lisbon or Old Lisbon or something.
Yeah, and then there's another one further down now, closer to Coral Gables.
Yeah, that's the one that everyone told me about. I forgot the name of it, with the door or something.
Yes, yeah.
I haven't eaten there, but
no, I haven't yet
but try that. That's another another tip. Ask the locals about where they would eat to try another experience.
And then, if say you're going to Portugal, go to one of those restaurants. And tell maybe your waiter's Portuguese.
Yeah.
Tell him you're going to Portugal.
Yeah.
You never know. He might say, "Oh, well, look up my uncle."
Okay, that's a much better tip. So go in your city to a restaurant indigenous of the place you want to go visit.
Right.
And they may introduce you to someone.
Exactly.
That's
you
wonderful.
never know. People often are very eager to share, knowledge and share family with you. So.
And in Vietnam, which I know you were very fond of, did you get to try their foods a lot? Was that very
the
unique,
food was a revelation.
Was it?
Again, 94, I don't think I'd had much Vietnamese food here in South Florida.
Right.
And it was really good. It was so fresh and clean. There was something, it wasn't. I don't know. I love Vietnamese food.
I lived off those Vietnamese trucks all the time. I used to really, really adore the flavors, but it's a little spicy. Are you able to tolerate spice sometimes?
I love spice. Actually, I really love Korean food too. And that was, I went to Seoul just for a long weekend.
Me too, yeah.
On my way back from China. And that was my first introduction to Korean food. And I think everything I ate that weekend, I just loved.
Phenomenal,
and,
their flavors or their little tapas were very
when you sit down, they just bring all those little plates. And there's always kimchi, which I love, and which is very good for you.
The fermented type of food is good for your health and whatnot. Right. I'm probably not able to tolerate spice, but it was just the consistencies and the flavors I thought were so unique. And how did you end up working, let's say, as an editor? What was the trajectory to becoming to sort of this large-scale editor of a larger, metropolitan
Well,
area?
when I came back from Poland, I worked in Philadelphia for a medical publication for a while. Doing feature stories, not writing about the actual science.
Okay.
And then I worked for 2 years as an editorial writer at a newspaper in Rhode Island.
Nice.
And then I saw an ad in Editor and Publisher magazine, which is kind of the trade magazine that journalists would read. And in the back, they'd have a list of job openings.
Okay.
And I saw that the newspaper in Fort Lauderdale was looking for a travel editor. And I'd published a few travel stories and a few essays, and I sent them my clips.
I mean, you had gotten in the New York Times and those types of
back
publications.
then, the New York Times travel section every Sunday would have an essay on the last page.
Okay.
They don't have it anymore.
Oh.
But I'd done a few of those, and so I had a few clips, and I sent them, and they hired me.
And was it competitive at the time to get into that back page?
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, it's
I
the
would
New
think.
York Times.
That's what I would think.
And it was competitive to get the job as travel editor because
congratulations,
it's the
though.
job everybody wants.
Of course, yeah.
A number of people at the newspaper applied for the job.
Oh no.
And I did have experience, and I think the fact I'd lived abroad and spoke a couple languages helped.
Polish that's very unique. I mean, my neighbors are Polish, but yeah, it's such a rich culture as well, and I haven't made it over there. But
that's another country that's not overrun with tourists. So when you go there, you do get that feeling. You feel the hospitality. People seem to
embrace
like
tourists
that you came, and if you speak the language, you're like family. I mean, and that's the advantage of learning these little-known languages.
Yes.
Or languages that not many non-native speak.
Correct.
Because whenever I'm traveling, if I hear somebody speaking Polish, I'll go up to them and say, and this happened to me in Venice recently. There was a woman talking to her little daughter, and she lives in Venice. She's Polish, but she lives in Venice. She's married to an American artist, and she had me over for dinner one night.
That's amazing.
It was great, and that would not have happened if I didn't speak Polish.
That's fantastic. And what were you doing in Venice, one of everyone's favorite cities in the world?
That was an assignment from a travel magazine, which has this thing where they'll send a writer somewhere on 24 hours notice. So I knew I was going somewhere for 5 days, but I didn't know where until the day before.
Wow, I love it.
And they sent me an email with the ticket attached, and I looked at it and it said Venice. And
was it to cover something in particular?
No, they just want to drop you in a place and see what happens without any preparation. Which again, it's not my favorite way. As I said, I do a lot of preparation. I think preparation really helps you. I had been to Venice before. And I did buy a guidebook as soon as I found out where I was going. And that helped me because I learned about a group there that it's a group of local residents kind of in their 40s who would come up with ideas to make Venice more livable because it's a difficult place to live. It's not convenient.
The flooding and everything.
Yeah, you don't have a car. You have to walk everywhere and grocery shopping.
All the time. Yeah,
the shops have become tourist shops. So a lot of people are leaving Venice.
Oh, interesting.
But this is a group of very dedicated young, 40-ish, 50-ish people who are trying to find ways to make it more attractive, and they would present their ideas to the government. But I went to one of their meetings while I was there.
But how did you find them?
They were written about in the guidebook. Then I went on their website, and I saw on the website, because I speak French, I can kind of make out a bit of Italian. And I found out they were having a meeting one of the days I was in
that's
Venice.
a great idea.
So I went to the meeting. I crashed their meeting. And again, they were young professionals. Most of them spoke English.
Wonderful,
and I met this very nice woman who was a guide, a tour guide in Venice. And she translated throughout the meeting.
That's great.
She interpreted, told me what was happening. And then I met her later during my stay and learned about Venice kind of through the eyes of a tour guide, which was interesting.
Very interesting, yeah. And did you finish that piece already? Can people find
that was
it,
years ago. I forget, I think it was around 2009. And the magazine was AFAR, AFAR, the travel magazine based in San Francisco.
Very nice, wow. And I meant to ask you, with that Palermo group that you found, how did you find them? Kids or those people?
They were younger. They were in their 20s and 30s.
20s and 30s.
Now, of course, they're a bit older. But I found, I'd read some news stories about them. Mostly in British newspapers. Not so much, there hadn't been much coverage in the U.S. But I Googled them, obviously, and then these stories came up from the British press. And then I went to their website. And they have a travel arm. I mean, you can go now and take anti-mafia tours of Sicily.
Oh, wow.
And Palermo.
Yeah, there's an interesting thing. I went a few years ago, but I didn't. I thought they were more or less disappeared, but Sicily was by far just one of the most incredible experiences that I've had.
It is, and unfortunately, I never got out of Palermo. I was so busy doing, researching this story that I never left the city. But I did an interview a few weeks ago with Pauline Fromer of the Fromer Guides.
Wow,
and
nice.
she read the advance copy of the book, and she knew that restaurant where I had that lunch with the restaurateur and the mafioso walk by. She knew the restaurant. She'd been to that restaurant, but she didn't know its connection to the anti-mafia movement.
Very interesting. Yeah.
So,
that's fascinating. Wow. Has that gentleman, does he know you wrote a book, or maybe not?
The story, I sent him the story when it was published in the Missouri Review, and then it appeared in the Best American Travel Writing 2012. So I sent him that. He doesn't know yet it's in the book. So when the book comes out, as soon as it comes out next week, I'm going to send him a copy and surprise him and say, now you're in a book. And I'm really happy because it'll get more exposure for their organization, and I hope people will go and take their tours.
Yeah, that's a wonderful idea. That's the way that they can raise money for their cause. I love that. And they expose people to more of the culture and the history. And
because there are mafia tours of Sicily as well.
I didn't know that either.
There's this town Corleone, which they got the name for the family in The Godfather from this town.
Right.
And they take these mafia tours, and they kind of glorify the mafia.
Right.
And this group, my group, Adio Pizzo, they take tourists there as well and show them the anti-mafia aspect.
And what's the name of the group again?
Adio Pizzo.
How do you spell that?
ADDIO-PIZZO.
Okay.
It's the word for goodbye in Italian, adio. And pizzo is like pizza, but it's an O at the end instead of an A, and that's the bribe. That's the protection money that you pay the mafia. So it's goodbye to
I love it.
protection money.
I actually couldn't understand the Sicilian language. I mean, I've been trying to take Italian for 15 years on and off, and I got there and I could understand 3% maybe. It was,
supposedly Sicilian's very different from Italian.
It has that whole other side. But no, that's fascinating. That's very interesting that you had that experience. Did
it was
you
one
get
of my
sent?
best.
Yeah.
No, that was a story I just did on my own.
Oh,
I pitched it. I pitched the idea to some magazines. Didn't get anybody interested in it, so I just went on my own and did it.
That's perfect.
And it was nice in a way because when you do a story for a magazine, they kind of want it to be done the way they exactly.
Yeah.
And this way, I came back with all this material and I wrote as much as I had, and I ended up writing about 7,000 words, which for most magazines is a very long story.
Sure.
But it was good. I mean, it was interesting material, and I didn't cut it. And I sent it around, and eventually it found a home with this literary quarterly, the Missouri Review.
That's phenomenal. No, that's wonderful. I love those interesting stories. And I went to a place, I don't know if you had heard of it, because I had not heard of it previous, Taormina in Sicily.
I know, I wanted to go there so badly.
It's a place, it's got the Colosseum,
so beautiful.
Over the ocean. If you Google pictures of this, Taormina, and I heard accidentally about it through someone from the Italian club whose cousin lived there. She's American too, but there's just so many places that are in Sicily that are so unique looking, different than the typical Italian, what the Americans know as the Italian travel route to go to. But your book, that it's coming out and people can order it online.
It's already available for pre-order on Amazon, but it's coming out May 3rd, and I'm going to be speaking at Books and Books in Coral Gables.
What day? What time?
May 13th.
May 13th. Wonderful. Is that a Thursday or?
That's a Friday.
A Friday,
which is nice because it's the beginning of the weekend, and they probably will have music in the courtyard as they often do. I know. I love that store too. I was there last night actually.
Really?
Yeah.
There's so many unique writers and stories that are presented there.
Well, Mitchell Kaplan, who runs it, has done such a great job just kind of bringing together the literary community of South Florida. I mean, writers and readers, and that's where they meet.
Connecting them.
Yeah.
I was just at the Emerge conference, and they had a little pop-up, so I bought a few books there, because I think everyone does a lot of audiobooks as well these days, but there's something about holding a book and flipping through it that's very nostalgic and fun. And how did you think to do this cover? How did that happen?
Well, the covers are always done by the publishing house.
Oh, okay.
They did pass covers by me to get my feedback, and there were this one was finally decided on after a number of other tries, but I gave them some pictures of covers I liked of other travel books, and then they got this picture which I just love. I really like. It's got this retro feel to it, which is kind of the way I travel. I mean, I'm kind of an old-fashioned style. I don't use a lot of technology when I travel. I feel that can kind of take you out of the moment if you're doing too much with your cameras and cell phones and all that. I really like to be in the moment. I love it. So have those kinds of experiences.
But have you traveled by train quite a lot to close up?
I love traveling by train. I love it. I love it. It's one of, and there's a story. There's a train story in this book to illustrate the joy of movement. Even though it turned out to be the worst train trip I've ever taken in Myanmar. It bucked.
I haven't been to Myanmar. I was supposed to go for a wedding.
Just first it swayed from side to side, and then it bucked. You were actually literally lifted up and down in your seat for 17 hours.
Oh my gosh, 17 hours.
Well, 17 hours.
What year was that? Is it better now?
That was 3 years ago.
Oh, wow.
It was the only time I ever thought how nice and how comfortable the flight home in coach is going to be. I mean, it was just torture. Aww. But it did show me the joy of other kinds of travel. But normally I love trains. I mean, the first hour of this train trip was fantastic because it was a slow glide through the city, through all the neighborhoods, and you came right into people's backyards. Wow. You could look in kitchens. It was wonderful.
Was it very different than the rest of Asia, the architecture?
It was it was a little more primitive than Vietnam and China now and other places like Malaysia, places, Thailand definitely. But trains, I love them. To even taking a train to Orlando, you see the cattle. You don't see cattle in Florida. You see them from the train. And the thing that I love about all means of transportation are escape. I mean, it's a way you get on a vehicle and you escape. You're out of the world. Yes. But the train takes you from the world while taking you right through it. Yeah. I mean, you go through the middle of town and people, you see schools and kids and mail trucks and dogs, and it's all right there, just inches away. But you're sitting on the train,
observing,
completely removed from it. And I love that. I love sitting in the dining car, eating and looking out the window and seeing life go by.
Right. Have you been? I don't think I've been on the Orient Express. Have you been actually on that? Or
no, those really expensive trains I just can't afford.
Okay.
I have taken Amtrak. You can't do it any longer, but there was a period when you could get on Amtrak in Miami and take it all the way to LA. Oh. And I did that. It was a 3-day trip. Wow. Through New Orleans and Texas with a sleeper. And I've taken the train from here to New York as well. 24 hours.
Okay. Get a sleeper. But wow. Well, okay. Well, in closing, any other last thoughts to share with people? To sort of end?
Two things, I think. One, I always urge, try to go to those less glamorous places. Some of the unsung places sometimes give you the most enjoyable experiences.
Agreed.
And try to experience what the life of the local is like. And meet people and see how they live.
And you're right. These days it's so easy with meetups. You can find people who might speak English or not.
It's so much easier now.
Or even on TripAdvisor, it's probably obvious which are more touristic places and which are not, if you do all that preparation like Thomas had mentioned. So thanks a million for being with us. And
thank you.
Everyone will try and go to this book signing on
May 13th.
May the 13th. At what time?
8 o'clock.
8 o'clock. Okay. Adios, au revoir.
Bye-bye.
How do you say it in Polish?
Do widzenia.
Okay, thanks.